Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Oh, oh, that's
Alright, so
clever.
I had a nice little segue in there. Oh wait, I need to go bloom this way. I had a nice little segue in there because this is what I do. I have spent many hours trying to figure out how this is gonna go one way or the other, and I am super stoked that this is finally working. So
Very good. Try and be professional and keep my smoking off screen. Um,
it's whatever. So, we are finally here. We finally have. Hold on, let me pull the house music down a little bit so we don't have to shout over top of it. So we are finally here with a VAWMA live stream. This should.
Yay!
Right?
I'm glad
We
to
did
be
it.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels good.
So,
It feels like it's the right time.
that's what I'm saying. And, I think we had agreed that this was going to be kind of like a collaborative journey. So, like, we
Hmm.
were going to be talking about where we started, where we came from, how we got here, that type of stuff.
100%.
Um,
I'm just taking a look at my camera and seeing my light angles are horrible. My
well,
background is very well lit. My
yeah,
foreground, not so much.
you know what? That's okay, because we finally got this working. We can now see what the live stream looks like. And this is literally episode one of VAWMA. And yeah, everyone can kind
Multi
of
alpha.
right there we go. VAWMA Alpha. Um, everyone can literally see from the beginning. This is episode one. It's clunky. It was weird. It's a back and forth conversation to figure out what's the stream going to be about.
And I think ultimately it's going to be about our journey of starting a cooperative venture amongst our friends and strangers who hopefully will become friends into our communities in a way that will help us all, everybody who's involved. I think it's no stranger or I've made no qualms about sharing about how I feel about being a wage slave, and I don't like it, and I don't think anybody does. And the only alternative we've ever seemed to be given is to make other people our wage slaves if we don't want to be a wage slave, and I don't accept that. I think if we're going to get out of the problems we find ourselves in as a civilization, as a species, on our planet, it's going to take a collaborative effort, and we just don't have the structures in place for that. And well, we got to start somewhere. So we're starting with VAWMA here in our little corner of northern southwestern Ontario, in the budding rural metropolis of Owen Sound, in the Grey Bruce area. And so I'm really looking forward to exploring the ideas inherent to, how we're going to do this. What are our solutions? And I'm really excited to let this journey unfold and to let our audience, if we ever have any, to become a part of what it is that we're going to be doing, to let them see our mistakes, because I'm sure we're going to make plenty of them, and to let them in on the process of like researching and um, yeah, let them see like what it when somebody says, okay, well, if we need to do something, let's start it. And I don't know, it's kind of got that. I'd like to think it's got a little bit of that DIY punk ethic to it there as well, where it's like, we're not going to wait for a government program to come along to, show us how to do this. There are no courses in any university that I'm aware of that teaches lay people how to start cooperatives. There might be something in St. Mary's. I've heard rumors, but that's all the way out in on the East Coast there. And even if that was the case, I certainly don't have the money to go to it. So I'm going to be relying. This is going to be the poor man's journey into how to become a cooperative enterprise with your friends. And so I'm excited for that.
I think I would. I would not necessarily say the poor man's journey. I would say the everyday man's journey.
You know what?
Um,
That's probably a much better way of phrasing it.
yeah, because I mean, I know personally from when I was growing up, like, co-ops were always farm-based. You know, you went to the farmer's
Hmm.
co-op because that
Yeah.
is what was a thing. Um, and then it wasn't until actually you and I started talking that I started realizing that, oh, there are other co-ops out there. There are other co-ops that are cooperatives, not in the sense of, like co-op housing, but
Hmm.
co-op business ventures. Um, and that is it's, I would call it an ignorance on my part because where I grew up, a co-op was either farmers or it was the ghetto. Like,
Yeah.
let's call a spade, right? You have the co-op housing that were always a ghetto. Um, and
Like
so when I
run
started,
down and sort
yeah,
of like a place where people of a certain class or type would be gathered due to economic
yes,
things outside of their control. Yeah.
yes. And unfortunately, the handful of good people that were in those living situations were also masked and hidden behind the riffraff and the rundown and the everyone else.
Mm.
Um, and so when I started learning about Mondragon and the co-ops that were out in BC and
I'll have
um,
to learn a new one too. Eskrut
oh,
in Finland.
oh, nice,
Yeah.
that's exciting.
We'll talk about that
So
one later. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean that's the thing is that I think education is really where the starting spot is slash should be. Um,
Mm.
and that's actually why I kind of started pushing you a little bit to let me help you with this live
Thank
stream
you. Yeah.
because accessibility is key, right? And I'll let you talk a little bit more about the venture that you went on back in November that I kind of opened the door for you and shoved you through, but it was 100% all you. Um, but it's
Oh
getting
wow.
the word out there. And I think accessibility, with the conversation you and I had the other day, um, being able to have our message out there on as many medium platforms as possible. And I don't mean, oh, you said media wrong. No. If you look back into those heritage moments, medium is the message.
Mm.
That's what I'm referring to. The medium is the message. So where TV used to be the medium, and if you were on TV, you were a big effing thing. Now it's accessibility is the message. If you are accessible through smartphone, through laptop, through Chromebooks, desktops, browsers, what have you, the more accessible you are, the more access to the medium you will have. If, and I know you and I had this conversation earlier, if we want our message out there and someone's looking on their smartphone and they can't access our message from their smartphone, we've lost them.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. So, to start off episode one, why don't you let us know where you came from? Why did VAWMA become your passion project and your passion in life, your fulfillment? What spurred that in whatever way you are comfortable speaking? And
Yeah.
how did you get us from where it was just a thought in your head to where we are today?
Sure. I'll try my best to not go too far back into wander into the areas of TMI.
Yeah, we can
Um,
start in like the early 2000s. We don't have to go back to like 19 diggity.
that we're gonna get stop there, David Copperfield. If we're gonna go
That's
this
right.
far, we're gonna need popcorn, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So what I'll do then is I'll go back to uh, a thought process I had probably around 2017, somewhere around there. I was working at a job like you do, just trying to make ends meet. It wasn't my passion. It wasn't, a particularly great job. It was actually, it was a manufacturing job. It was just putting doohickeys on stuff and doing that over and over and over and over and over and over again, very mindless. I could listen to podcasts, which was great. And in doing so, I discovered a love for Dungeons and Dragons. I was listening to a lot of Critical Role at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and that was inspiring me to like, well, if I could do anything with my life, and I, didn't have any constraints, what would I do? And the answer to me at the time was very, very simple, very plain. I would be a dungeon master for hire, where I would just my job would be to help create group narrative stories, improvise stories with strangers, and help them become the heroes of their own stories for a time, and I could think of no better thing to do. So, in order to do that, I figured I would need a venue to do something like that in, and so my dream of Flagons and Dragons came into existence at that point, codenamed
Love that.
Flagons and Dragons. Yeah, which is public house for geeks, nerds, and romantics of all ages, and thought other people had done sort of like a board game cafe or board game pub sort of thing back at that point in time. This is pre-COVID, and I thought our particular little part of the world is a bit of a tourist trap. It doesn't have anything that's geek oriented, and that was particularly big at the time, and I thought we could do that, but I can't do it alone. So if I'm going to do this, I need to go into business with my friends, really.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started thinking, well, A, how do we raise the capital? And B, once we do, how do we do our business in a way that's ethical and fair for everybody involved?
Right.
And that ultimately started me down uh, the trail of trying to figure out how to do business in an ethical way that didn't grate at my soul, by turning my friends into wage slaves.
Right.
I didn't necessarily have the language to describe that at the time, but I knew that I didn't want to necessarily be the dictator. I didn't want to be the person, in control of everything to the exclusion of everybody else, where
Mm-hmm.
it's my way or the highway sort of thing. And that seems to be the kind of for sole proprietorship, that's certainly how it is. When you start looking into like a joint stock option sort of affair, it becomes a little bit more curious, because the people who invest more money get more power when it comes to
Right.
votes and
Yes.
control. And I'm sitting here going, like, back then I was poor. I'm even more poor now. I had no money to invest. I'm bringing my labor and my ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and so to create a business uh, that allowed for everybody involved to basically get a cut of the business was where I started journeying, and so I came up with this very elaborate, very convoluted business plan, and as I got to thinking about what we would do, and if we ever turned a profit, and we ever wanted to expand, like I had like a 27 layer plan worked out at one point in time, where it was like, and once we make this amount of money and we have it set away, that we can invest in this next structure and blah blah. I had it all worked out,
Right.
like you do, like it just runs away with you,
Yeah.
and I talk to my friends, because if you're going to collaborate with your friends, it's always important to incorporate them at some point during the that conversation. And we actually went down. We were looking at the old bingo hall as a place that we would go into, and so I actually organized a viewing between me and all my friends that we were going to go into collaborate in. And of course, they were wise. They realized that none of us had the money to invest in such a high risk venture at that time.
Right.
Like the roof needed to be replaced, a lot of internal work would need to be done on the place, and like I'm a great gopher. If I'm with somebody who knows what they're doing and they tell me what to do, I can do it.
Right.
I can follow instructions. But if you give me a hammer, a set of nails, and a flat of wood and say go to it, I'm going to stand there and look at you like you've got two heads because I don't know how to build a structure
Where
from
am I
scratch
going and what
myself.
is it to?
So no matter what, this is going to be a collaborative effort. I'm either paying for the expertise or I'm bringing people in to join with me to be a part of
Mm-hmm.
the journey. And if I'm going to do that, how do I do that in a way that is fair for everybody
Right.
and is also enticing for people? Because let's face it, human beings are certainly in the post-Reagan era, we're nothing if not creatures that are all looking out for our own self-interest. And okay, if that's the game, that's the game. And what do I need to do in order to make this, part of your self-interest? Okay, so my friends, we didn't. Flagons and Dragons didn't materialize. It didn't happen.
Yeah.
But it lit the spark between under my brain to figure out, okay, if starting with a restaurant, pub slash flea market slash whatever Flagons and Dragons is in its entirety is too risky of a business to start on, what if we started with another business that was more stable, um, more likely to produce a surplus or a profit over the short or long run,
Mm-hmm.
or the immediate here and now, that we could then use and turn around to then produce the things that we want to frequent ourselves as customers, not let alone as like potential part owners, like Dragons and Dragons, and and that was in part inspired by friends of mine who are entrepreneurs who have several businesses. And the reason why they have several businesses is because when one business starts to go into a slump, and all businesses have like a high time and a low time, when one of their businesses goes into a slump, they just transition their focus from the business that's in a slump to a business that's in its high part of its high season, and make their money that way, and then use the money that they make from the business that's making a lot of money right at the moment
Mm-hmm.
to help offset the other business that's in a bit of a slump right at the moment. And then now they've got two businesses that are basically operating at their high ends at different times of the year. So they just change their focus, hire the people to run the stuff as they need to, and it's chaotic, but it works. It's so taking that idea, uh, I then discovered in 2019, I think it was,
Mm-hmm.
through the miracle of the YouTube algorithm, it suggested that I might enjoy this particular person. I think he had been interviewed on a TV show that I watch, or not TV show, showing my age, a YouTube
TV.
channel
What's
that I
that?
frequent. Yeah, I frequent. The Majority Report with Sam Cedar. He interviews guests all the time, and I
Mm-hmm.
believe that Professor Richard Wolff was interviewed on his program,
Mm-hmm.
and as a guest to comment on politics and things that are during the day. And if it wasn't the Majority Report with Sam Cedar, it was absolutely the Michael Brooks show with Michael Brooks, who is sadly no longer with us. He was a great person and truly an inspiration. Rest in power, Michael. But the that introduced me to got me to a YouTube lecture. It was like an hour and a half, maybe been 2 hours, called "Understanding Marxism." And I thought, I grew up in North America during the height of the Cold War and the end of the Soviet Union. I when I was a kid, the Soviet Union still existed. I remember when Chernobyl happened, and all that fun stuff.
And now you are showing age.
Yeah, no, I am. And I remember when the Soviet Union collapsed. I remember watching it on the TV with my dad, and like that kind of stuff was a fascinating thing to live through. But if you were to ask me what the core tenets of Marxist thought were, I couldn't tell you other than to say that Red Scare bad, communism bad because
Right.
well, look, they've got prisons and bread lines, and people can't get their basic needs, and people have to fear for whether or not they're going to be carted off for a non-violent crime. You know, sorry, I'm talking about the Soviet Union, not North America. But
Just random people that are coming in going, oh god, what?
right, or at least I'm talking about what we were told the Soviet Union was like, and
Yes.
so like I didn't know anything about like any theory. I didn't know anything about it, so I was curious. So I watched the Understanding Marxism lecture, and I walked away with an understanding of the labor theory of value, and that just blew my world completely apart. And all of a sudden, like terms that I had been vaguely familiar with from like an angsty, punk adjacent, religious, heavy religious
Mm-hmm.
teenagehood. I had heard the terms wage slave somewhere, and it makes sense if you stop and think about it, but like finally understanding like the structures of capital, of how you've got your owners and you've got your workers, and the workers take the what do they call it? The living labor takes the embodied labor and turns it into a commodity, which can then be or sold, for a profit, and that gets controlled by the capitalist and all that other fun stuff. And if that makes sense to you, a if not, we'll do an episode on that one of these days, and we'll get somebody who knows
Absolutely.
what they're
That's
talking
that's
about
what
to
this is
talk
about,
about it,
right?
right? And but suffice to say, I one of the other things that Rick talked about in that uh, lecture was he talked about worker-owned cooperatives and about how that was quite literally the fulfillment of the socialist dream of workers controlling the means of production,
Mm-hmm.
or which is another way of saying having democracy in the workplace.
Mm-hmm.
And that reframing of stuff made a lot of sense to me. Like I can get my brain behind having one person, one vote. I can get my brain behind having a chance to have a say in the policies that are going to be shaping and forming my workplace.
Mm-hmm.
I like those ideas. I like the idea that I get to have a chance and a say to shape and form the life that I'm going to lead,
Mm-hmm.
especially the place where I'm spending the majority of my time. If any of us are working full time hours, you're spending 8 hours out of your 16 hours of consciousness. Um, at a place where you typically don't control, what you get to do, what you get to wear, what you get to say, how you get to say it. If anybody's ever worked a customer service job, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it sucks, right? And it shouldn't have to be that way. Like these are jobs that do not have to make people feel like they're nothing. These can be jobs that are can give people dignity. This is an opportunity for people, especially if you're gregarious, to interact with people and make their day all day long. But instead, we make it a gruel and a grind.
Mm-hmm.
And even if we do make the customer's day, and even if we do in turn make a sale, how much of that sale comes back to us. Well, we get paid minimum wage so often. That's not cool. And then we'll watch the owners drive away with like a sports car or go to vacation for 2 months in some tropical island somewhere, and or go to their cottage, every single weekend, and
Right.
right. And we're sitting here going like, fuck, I hope I can pay my bills. I wonder which bill I'm going to pay first. You know,
Put all the
we've got
bills in a
five
pot.
bills, four of them are getting paid.
That's right. Who doesn't get paid this month?
right?
Yeah.
And and people, I've heard it said that this is the politics of envy, and I'm like, no, this is like, it's not that I hate that they've got a cottage and they get to go on vacations and they get to not have to worry about how they're going to pay their bills. I wish that for everybody, and I think that there's enough around for everybody to be able to live a life worth living.
Mm-hmm.
And But I also recognize that under capitalism, if you're in that top position, you're incentivized to to maintain everything that's afforded to you when you sit in that position.
Absolutely.
And I can't hate people for making the best, living their best life possible in the situations that they are happen to have access to, even if I don't have access to them. So rather than bitch and complain about it, why don't I try and figure out a way to make the fair thing happen rather than you know complain about the fact that it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Well, okay. So Rick pointed me in the direction. He started me on this journey of discovering what a worker-owned and directed cooperative is. And from there, I've
Now,
learned
sorry, can I
so
just
much. Yes, please.
answer one question? Um, when you say Rick, who specifically
Oh,
are you
Richard
referring
Wolf.
to?
Yeah,
Okay, okay, okay. Carry
yeah.
on.
Sorry.
Okay,
I have such a parasocial relationship with him. I just casually refer to him as Rick now.
not a problem. Now we
He's
know.
never met me.
Perfect.
He
We
doesn't
have
have a
put
clue who I am.
we have put the flow chart together. Rick equals Richard Wolf. Awesome.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No, I think I watched his economic update on yesterday, and the professor that he was hanging out with, like the only other Marxist professor in North America. I don't know if that's true, but it certainly seems that way. But they're old friends, so they were just palling around, and the one professor kept referring to Professor Richard Wolf as Rick. So
Perfect.
Anywho, so yeah, cooperatives were and are have become a special interest of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Something that I've been able to put like countless hours into just listening to lectures that I find on YouTube, scouring through different websites. Some shout outs. We got One Worker, One Vote out there. We've got the Ontario Cooperative Association. Um, we've got the Partners in the Harvest Network. Partners are not Partners in Harvest. Partners in Pollination. Oh, hold on. What are they called? 2 seconds. If I'm
Yeah.
going to shut them out, I might as well shut them out correctly.
Well, and that's the thing.
Uh,
While you are looking for the
Pollinators of
actual link,
Change.
pollinators of
Yeah.
change. For those that are going to be watching the VOD, can you put those links in the video description?
Ooh, good question. I can sure try.
Yeah, I mean, you can throw them in the chat, and then we can add them to the video description later. Um,
Here.
or we can do a link to the. You have a website happening, right? Sorry, I don't mean to
Oh,
derail.
yeah.
I'm going to put a pin in your conversation that you are having. I know where you're headed with it. Um, but you do have a website. Can we find those links on that website?
Not yet. And but the website is at this point a one step above um, what we call hold on, back.
Multitasking for the win.
Sorry. Oh yeah, was I gone?
No, you're okay.
Okay. Um, yeah, our website VAWMA.com is currently an overglorified placeholder at this point. If I suspect there might even be some lorem ipsum still on the site and some of the menus there. But it is hopefully at some point going to be a repository for knowledge for all the links that we talk about as we grow,
Yeah.
as well as will become the organizing hub that we'll use as we grow our local cooperative. That's the hope. Um, We turn our get a little app going that allows us to run our meetings, allows us to check in when we show up to a workplace, allows us to vote in groups. So if business A is having a group meeting where they're like trying to figure out policy and they're using sociocracy to vote,
Mm-hmm.
and they just use the app to just register their vote, and that way they can see their vote, but they're not bothering all the rest of us. We have little groups,
Oh
like
wow.
so. Visioning. That's where I'm hoping that we can bring the website to at some point in the future. But for now, it's just here's an idea. VAWMA, the
Which
Voluntary
kind of,
Association for Work and Mutual Aid, is what
yeah, which
the
I mean
VAWMA
kind of
stands for.
ties into exactly what we're talking
Mm,
about, right? Every project needs a starting spot.
exactly.
Um, and so to go back to what you were mentioning earlier before I very rudely cut you off, Richard Wolff had led you in the direction of worker directed co ops and
Mm-hmm.
producer directed co ops. And that's where you really started to do a lot of your research and watching these seminars and webinars and all that kind
Mm-hmm.
of fun stuff of how to start a co op? Or did you already have the idea of VAWMA beforehand?
So no, we went from Flagons and Dragons. I went from like being a DM for hire to
Mm-hmm.
Flagons and Dragons to I need to start multiple businesses in order to get to my dream business, because
Right.
my dream business is not a good business to start on. It's not a good foundation to start. I don't think. Or certainly at the time, it seemed a little bit more risky than something a little bit more pedestrian, like
Right.
I don't know, a lawn care business or snow removal. Yeah,
What?
um,
Snow removal? In Canada?
yeah, right. Indeed, right. It's a required thing, although not right at the moment. Um,
No. I think that's a
I
conversation for
know.
another day.
Yeah. So I came up with this idea in trying to figure it out, where if we had, and I came up with an arbitrary number, 10. We had 10 businesses that all had about 10 people, more or less,
Mm-hmm.
running each individual small business.
Mm-hmm.
Then, and if each of us brought $100 each to chip in, then we could sequentially start our businesses one at a time, maybe sometimes two at a time if we had enough money stored up in the bank. And then each business would just contribute to the big pot in order to get the next business going, and then create a cascading effect. And eventually, we'd have 10 businesses with 100 people, 100 members, and that was going to be what I very cleverly entitled the 10-100 cooperative idea. And so I had almost registered 10-100.coop. But and I thought, at one point, if it ever took off, the concept of the 10-100 on an international level, we should transition from English to French, because 10-100 in French is 10 cent, and I always thought it would make it a very decent enterprise. Yeah,
Ah, ladies and
right.
gentlemen.
But so it would have worked great in French. But as all things that work great on paper in real life, and after many, 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 like hundreds, maybe thousands of conversations with people, the general consensus was that uh, having one or 10 companies with 10 people each in each company, um, though it sounds great and might work, good luck hurting that, around a group of cats, right?
Yes.
It's too rigid, and they were right. It was too rigid. It would have worked. And then the basic idea being like you've got 100 people, each bringing $100 every
Mm-hmm.
month, to contribute to a pot, which ends up creating what's 100 people with $100. That's
Math is hard.
uh,
A
math
hundred
is
times a
definitely
hundred
hard.
is 1,000.
I remember it was yeah 10,000. That sounds
Ten
more right.
thousand. There we go.
Because I just remember it's like it can't be 1,000. And to anybody looking at me saying these guys are going to run a business, that's
Yep.
what we got calculators for. And we're not necessarily going to be the people in the CEO's position or anything like that when by the time this all gets up and running. We're I think I view myself as responsible for like laying the foundation, creating the bylaws, and creating the framework that all this will kind of function in. But if I can get this whole thing to the point where it's up and running and functioning, and I can just run off and be a cog in the machine, this is
Yeah.
the machine I want to be a cog in. I don't want to
That's
be a
awesome.
cog in the capitalist machine. I want to be a
Sure.
cog in this machine because I get to be a part of the process of I get to share in the rewards. It's so much
Yeah.
better than being a wage slave. Um, Sorry, what was the question? We were going on with some math. So yeah, 10,000 a month, and after a year, you end up with 120 grand. And you can start a business with 120 grand, right?
Mhm.
So if you get 100 people bringing $100, by the end of the year of everybody doing that, we can get one of our businesses started.
Right.
And then we go around the next year. The first business is in business, making money. Hopefully, knock on wood. It's got a group of 100 of us, or 90 of us, I should say, all out and about supporting that business from the community, sending people
Mhm.
to it. Getting our friends and neighbors to go be patrons and stuff like that. So hopefully our first business is going to be successful. And while it makes money, any money it makes goes into the pot that is also, you know, where all our money was going to, our $100 a month. Then that would then turn around and start the second company. And then we'd have two companies making money. And then we'd start the third company. And then we'd make the fourth and the fifth
Washer
until
and
we got
soap.
to
Yep.
10. Yeah, and then once we got to 10, then we'd just be laughing. We'd be making money. And is the idea. Exactly, right? And we'd all be sharing in the money somehow. I wasn't too sure at the time, but I knew that that's the direction I wanted to go.
Mhm.
And but again, even though on paper it looks great, and if we could get 100 people contributing $100 a month, we could do it. But finding 100 people willing to chip in $100 a month in today's economy, for something that might turn into a business in a year, might turn into a business that I can work in 7 years.
Mhm.
Don't know. It's a little. We need something a little bit more quick, a little bit more limber, a little bit more fluid than
Right.
that. So the 10-100 died ultimately as an idea. But from that idea, we took the best parts: the cooperative idea, the idea of like having multiple businesses or having a framework for multiple businesses, and said instead of starting with 100 people to begin with, why don't we start with whoever we can gather, and we just start with that. And
Yeah.
instead of it being $100 a month, because that is prohibitively expensive for some people. It's almost prohibitively expensive for me. I used to say I would somehow make it work. I don't know if I can make it work these days. Times are
Right.
tough, but
Exactly.
I would somehow do try to figure out something. And So let's lower the base fee to be connected to something a little more reasonable, something more like $25 a month. It's less than a cost of coffee a day. And at the end of the day, instead of poop and piss, you get a business that you're part owner in. And if that business makes money, you get a return.
Yeah.
So potentially better. And we would also then have, and we would make that base membership the consumer level, and the idea being that because as I learned about cooperatives, I learned that there are many different kinds of cooperatives. Cooperation is a kind of philosophy and an approach. When it comes down to the nitty gritty, you can have, as we talked about earlier, you can have your housing cooperatives, which is
Mhm.
where everybody kind of forms a joint stock company to own housing. Um, and Then you have your producer cooperatives, and the best way to think of this is if you're a farmer and you own your farm, but you don't want to be stuck in a situation where you're having to sell the individual produce that you make to individual people. You just
Yes.
want to grow your stuff and have somebody else take it away to like a grocery store or something,
Yeah.
and let the grocery store deal with the customers, sort of thing. Well, the farmer co-ops, they basically get together, a bunch of farmers, producer cooperatives, I should say. They get together and they say, instead of us individually selling stuff, we're going to pool our resources together and we're going to get paid out based on how much we produce, and that's a
Mm.
producer cooperative. You got the worker cooperative, which is where the business is owned and run and by the workers who work it. Typically, we would think of them as employees. Not in this
Mm-hmm.
case; they are worker owners. And when that business makes a profit or surplus, then the workers get to share in that surplus based on the amount of hours that they worked, the amount of hours that they contributed to producing the surplus. And then you got customers, consumer cooperatives, I should say, which is when the businesses is owned by the consumers themselves. So, great example of that used to be the Mountain Equipment Co-op. I don't know if that still stands. I don't know how much of a co-op they still are. A much better
Yeah.
example might be S Group, which I mentioned earlier. I just
Yeah.
discovered them like in the last 2 weeks, and they're in Finland, and they are a consumer cooperative. So the consumers own S Corp,
Okay.
and they then get to elect the board of directors who then run S Corp, and S Corp then turns around and then hires the people that will then run the
Ah.
business. So, not the greatest. They still have wage slaves in a situation like that, but the consumers are almost always also the workers there. So the people who work
Mm.
there are also consumer members, and
So it
so
is
they do
kind
have a
of a
little bit of it. It's a little
yeah.
bit more of a loop. It's not as good as a worker cooperative in my opinion, but uh, we're getting there. So they've got like grocery stores, gas bars, banks, um, Home Depot type stores. They've got the whole gamut. And
Mm-hmm.
I think Finland has like 5 point something or rather million people, and they've got like 3 point something or rather million of them are members of S Corp. So
Wow.
yeah, and like I mean, dreaming big. I'm like going, okay, one day VAWMA, right? And when we get to that point, so yeah, in the scenario like that, when S Corp, I don't know how they handle patronage and stuff, but I know in consumer cooperatives when they make a profit and there's a surplus, uh, they will give money back to their consumers based on how much money they make. And I heard somebody explain it to me once, and I don't know this for, exactly how they work, but it was like if you pay like for every $100 you spend at our store, we will give you a certain amount of the surplus, which
Right.
after taxes and all that other great stuff, probably be less than $100, but you get money back, right?
So it kind of worked like a Costco meets Canadian Tire, where you pay a monthly membership and then you get Canadian Tire dollars back, where every
That
$10
is
you
actually
spend,
a
you
way
get
of
like
doing
10
it.
cents.
Yeah, well, actually, it's more like somebody just described it as using in-store credit. So
Yeah.
it's like rather than you getting a check cut and the uh, which you can, you can get a
Sure.
some cooperatives do it where you get a check cut and you can just do with the money as you will. Some cooperatives do it where you get in-store credit, where it's like you get a little bit more than you would if you were cut a check, but you are limited to where you can spend it to inside the within the cooperative at that point. But
Right.
still, if you were going to shop there anyways, if you were going to spend
Then yeah.
$100 worth of money on groceries,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden the co-op says, well, we're going to give you $60, that you can now invest in groceries. So like, I'll take that $60. I'll put that
Right.
back into
I'm
groceries.
not picky.
Absolutely. No, I'm going to get the fancy ketchups this time.
Right?
right?
Heinz.
French's, but yeah,
Dijon ketchup.
there you go. But yeah, that's consumer cooperatives,
Mhm.
and so I think those are all the major ones. What what VAWMA? So we figured out that the 10100 wasn't a great idea. So in trying to figure out what we're going to do next, we're figuring out that
Mhm.
having a multi-stakeholder approach is probably the best approach to accomplish the vision that we want to do. And at
Right.
this point, let me talk about the vision that I want to do. I want to
Yeah.
create a network of worker-owned and directed businesses that are basically uh, pool their resources in such a way that helps each other out, and that everybody shares in the greater surplus that is made. And I'm kind of inspired. I hate to say it, by like things like Walmart and Amazon and these other huge conglomerations that have like multicorps, like Nestle and things like that, that
Yeah.
have so many different companies under their
Umbrella.
umbrella, that and yet all the money that those companies make go back to the parent company and to the owners, Blackwater, BlackRock. I forgot. Anyway, um, all these the Vanguard Group, fun stuff, and they all get mad profits. They all get mad money, and I'm kind of thinking, well, why don't we just do that? Only instead of the mad money going to like the 1%, it gets split between all the consumers and workers that helped make that money in the first place.
Mhm.
I'd be down with that. I'd be up for a slice of that,
Mhm.
and based on everybody else's self interest, when you want a slice of that, let's all get a slice of that, and then we can actually, live lives worth living, just like the 1% do, right? And so let's see. So to accomplish those goals, and to accomplish the goal of like everybody being able to participate in the success that multinationals have showed us is possible,
Mhm.
I want to make sure it's as democratic as possible, so that everybody who is connected to this has at some point a say in determining, who's going to be controlling this ship, who's going to be directing the ship, and if they're taking the ship in a direction that the majority of people aren't comfortable with, I think the majority of the people should be able to determine, that that's not the direction we should be going, right?
Mhm.
Um, Build into that like a nice some nice protections, so that we don't end up in a situation where the majority of people are exploiting and taking advantage of like smaller subclass of people, or
Yeah.
subsets of people. um, Not that they're beneath, but that they're different from the
Yeah.
majority. And to accomplish this, I think if we have a mixture of a consumer cooperative where everybody who is um, buying stuff from us is also part owner, but also have it where the workers who are, at the workplace every day, who are doing the work, who are, providing the services, who are, making the stuff that we then in turn buy, that they have a chance and a say to direct what those policies that they're going to be implementing on a day-to-day basis,
Mhm.
or at least a month-to-month basis, that they should have a chance and opportunity to affect that kind of change. So the overall dream is to get to a worker directed, community owned. So we'll be both owned by the workers and the consumers at that point. Um, and then when it all makes money, knock on wood, it then gets split into the different categories that it has to go in. Obviously, we pay our taxes because we're making money, and we also have to set aside if we've incorporated as a cooperative
Mhm.
corporation, we legally have to set aside some for a rainy day. We have to have a
Okay.
rainy day fund. That's not
Okay.
the technical term. I can't remember the technical term, but that's essentially what it boils down to: is we have to set aside money for the future in case we ever need it.
Okay.
We can't touch it. It's
Like a
not profit.
business RRSP?
It's I forget what it's called. I don't remember what the technical term is, but
That's
it's more
okay.
like it's money that we're not taxed on that we get to hold, that we get to keep in the business to make sure that the business has a buffer so that it doesn't,
Oh.
go into bankruptcy the minute like we owe the lighting bill or something, right?
Right. Okay.
And so we legally have to set aside part of the surplus for that. Okay, that's cool. And then we get so taxes, then the savings, and then we've
Mhm.
got the surplus, the profits. Right now, this would be where a limited liability company would, the board of directors and stuff would determine at what point how much they pay out in dividends, and how much goes into future expenditures, future investments, things like that. In
Okay.
our system, all the future endeavors will have been taken care of at this point within their individual businesses. They would have had their budgets sort of prearranged at this point. So now we're just dealing exclusively with the profits or the surplus. And at this point, the board of directors will split it up into basically three different categories. Category one will be patronage.
Mhm.
And okay, let me describe it in two different ways. Sorry, in a different way. There will be three categories, but two of those categories are kind of like fall under the heading of patronage.
Okay.
So we got patronage, and then we've got the community fund is what I'm going to call it just now off the top of my head. So under patronage, we've got patronage that goes to the consumers, and you've got patronage that goes to the workers. And patronage is kind of like a dividend share, only it's taxed differently and it's counted differently, as I recall, than dividend. Whereas dividend, you'll like get cut a check or something, or you'll have an account within that business that you have access to, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Um, with patronage, and the dividend is based on how much money you have invested in that company.
Okay.
That's what a dividend is based on. Um, with patronage, it's not based on how much money you've invested. It's based on, if you're a consumer, how much product you've purchased, which I guess is a kind of way of saying how much money you've invested. But with the worker, the patronage is based on how many hours you've worked out of the
Okay.
total amount of hours that are worked. So and yeah, so we create the patronage fund, and we create the community investment fund. And so what I want to do, and I'm pretty sure we can do this legally. Not 100% certain. So if like in a year or so I come back and say, yeah, we've read the laws and Canada won't let us do this, it happens sometimes.
Yeah.
But what we would like to do is make it so that the board of directors has a fund that they will set aside out of the profits or out of the surplus, that they will then turn to the membership and ask them, okay, we've set aside X amount of money out of the total surplus. We'll call it millions because we'll dream big. And of this millions of dollars that we have out of the patronage, or sorry, not patron, out of the surplus, separate from the patronage, we're going to ask our community where you would like us to invest this money. And over the course of the year, members will be able to. We'll have several general gatherings. At least 4 times a year, we'll have annual or not annual meetings. We'll have general gatherings, general
Right.
assemblies. At
I
which
was trying to
point,
think of what the quarter version of an annual meeting would be, but I don't know.
yeah, yeah. It would be a quarterly meeting, I guess. But it
That
would be a
sounds too easy.
general assembly where everybody's invited to show up, and then they can present their ideas that
Hmm.
they would have. And I envision and I hope that out of this we would have grants for artists being created, bursaries for educations. What is the only word I can think of right at the moment is public-private partnerships, where we invest in like things like playgrounds and uh, other community places that we take the money we've made as a community. Because remember, at least half our membership will probably be made up of our consumers, if not more, by the time we
Hmm.
actually grow. Um, because like eventually, like we may get to a point where we might have like a dozen or so different businesses running, but we may have a lot more larger customer base than we have workers. um, and uh, and that's okay. We've got a way to make sure that the things are balanced in terms of uh, how how we do things, so that the
Hmm.
consumers aren't in a position where they can turn the workers back into wage slaves, and conversely, the workers aren't also in a position where they can screw over the consumers. There's a nice healthy balance. And oh geez, I forget where I was going with all this.
These were the different layers of or different layers of co-op, and how
Yeah.
you had figured out which
Oh,
funnel you were going to
right.
take VAWMA down. Yeah.
Yeah, so the important bit in all this, and this is the part where it may or may not we may or may not be able to legally do this. We'll find out, and we invite you to join with us as we find out. But my big plan is to make it, in addition to allowing the members to propose, things that we can have as a community to fund. And this is where I'm thinking like individual artists could say, well, I have this project that I want to fund, or that I want to do, and it's going to cost me $20,000 in materials, and it's going to cost me, $20,000 in my time and labor. It's going to take half a year or whatever it is, or however much time it's going to take them. And we'd be like, okay, we will take that and we'll make that an option that our members can divert funds towards. And at any rate, before the annual meeting, the we will send out to all our members a list of all the different projects that the community has submitted for things to be funded, and we will ask them to. We'll have a list, and on that list will be check boxes, and on every checkbox we'll just say check off as many as apply that you want to see funded, and however many people check off whatever they want. And if you leave it blank, then the default is you checked off everything, and everything gets a little bit of the surplus.
Yeah.
If you specifically touch it, you can make it so that all of your portion of um, that community investment fund goes into one specific project if you wanted to, or you can have it spread it across three, five, a dozen, however many there are. You can fund them all, or fund. Well, if you opt out to fund none, we just assume that your portion is just being into the split amongst everybody
Right.
evenly.
Okay.
And so that's the vision. The workers, when they work hard, if they help the business produce more money, they get more money at the end of the year through patronage. Same with the consumers. If you buy with us a lot and you spend a lot of your money with us, you're going to get more money back at the end of the year. And for everybody that's involved, if you believe in your community, if you believe in if you believe in your community, you'll have an opportunity to vote and invest in parts of your community as well. That's the hope and the dream and the vision for what the Voluntary Association for Work and Mutual Aid can be. Um, and as speaking as from a business enterprise aspect, what it could be as a community building enterprise. It also excites me. The idea of like having regular gatherings where we just hang out with each other because we like human beings and we like hanging out with each other, and we don't want to necessarily have to commodify it. We don't want to necessarily have to make it be around sports or religion. You know, can't we just get together because human beings like to get together? And then when we get together, can we just check in with each other and make sure everybody's okay? You know, and when something happens in our community, like an emergency, a house burns down, or somebody dies unexpectedly, can we have like a community in place where people are like, shit, an acquaintance I know through VAWMA, they need a casserole, I will provide,
Right.
and yeah, so like creating that sort of community network hub is also part of the vision of VAWMA. And yeah, at the end of the day, to accomplish this, we're starting with a much more modular approach where we'll take everybody that we can. So I mentioned before we started with it at a much more reasonable $25 a month. This allows everybody to be a consumer member. So even our worker members are going to be consumer members of VAMA. And the idea being that if and when we get a storefront up and running, if and when we get business up and running, that any customer or any consumer member who patronizes our business will either get discounts, will get incentives to do so, to be our customer, and yeah, and if we make money at the end of the year, they'll receive a part of it. Everybody that's a part of it, and so we use that to then get as many customer members, consumer members as possible, and then we use that to help offset the amount of money we need to raise in order to raise the capital that we need to start these businesses. Um, but we're also going to have a business or two in mind when we start to incorporate and we start to reach out and bring in members, consumer members into our cooperative. And those people who have the idea for that business are the people that are like, yeah, I want to work for that business. They're going to become our worker members, dedicated members to that business, and they're going to chip in a little bit more than the $25 a month. They're going to have a little bit more of a buy-in. It's going to look a little bit more like that $100 a month I had originally envisioned,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just going to give us a little bit more of a pot of money that we can then go to something like the Van City Community Banking institution. I think they're a credit union. I'm not 100% certain, but the Van City Community Bank is a bank that invests into businesses like what we're trying to do. And if we can get all the money that we need to start our business upfront from them, then I think we totally should, and use that to start the business. And rather than doing the slow way where we all, every month put in our 25 or $100 or whatever in order to save up money by the end of the year, in order to get the business started by the next year, we can have a down payment on a loan to get the full amount that we need to get started, and then we get started.
Right.
And that's the basic idea for how that would happen. And then as it grows, we take the money that we make, we invest it back into our network, with the idea that we're not doing this just to start one business or two businesses. We're doing this to start networks of business.
Mm-hmm.
So like at some point, if you can think, like, I would love to see VAWMA chapters or VAWMA being able to have like actual franchises of things like Tim Hortons or stuff like that.
Right.
They probably won't allow us to do that, but if we could,
Well, we
that
can
would
have
be
a
the sort of
franchise
thing that I
of
would do.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure. 100%. We could start our own franchises.
Right?
Do like there's Mendy's Bakery sort of thing that we were talking about there the other day, and yeah. Um, But yeah, it's that's a lot, and that's basically got us to where we are now. We had a series of meetings in November where we presented a version of the VAWMA idea to the public
Mm-hmm.
over the course of 4 weeks, one night a week, and it was fun. It was successful, I think, in as far as it brought people to the table that wouldn't have been at the table before if we hadn't
Yeah.
done it, and that conversation has advanced the feasibility of this whole idea taking off exponentially. Just from being able to talk to people about incorporating and bylaws, and the guests that we had that were able to provide invaluable wisdom and experience
Yes.
and knowledge as to what we can do and where we should be looking and how we should be going and the pitfalls we should be avoiding, stuff
Mm-hmm.
like that. So I'm really excited. And if everybody who's stuck around with us up to this point, I would just like to say thank you for listening. You're awesome. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think we are actually coming up at a little over the 1 hour stream
Oh,
time.
are we over? Okay, fair.
Yeah, but that's okay because this is the pilot episode, right? So this is
Excellent.
where we figure out what we're doing. This is where we figure out where is this stream going to go in the future? How are we going to do the stream in the future? What the what? Um, so I know you and I had talked previously that Tuesdays, Tuesday morning specifically works best for us.
Mm,
And we were originally aiming for a 10 o'clock start with
correct.
technical difficulties, and we finally figured out this whole streaming thing.
That was fun.
Um, right? Uh, so what do you think? Are we on board for a once a week VAWMA sit and chat where we discuss what we've learned in the last week and what are we gonna go for next week?
Yeah, I think so. I would like
Okay.
that. And I think next week what we should do, now that we kind of talked about this sort of thing, we should tease out and explore the idea that we were chatting about uh, with getting together with our entire group of D&D friends and opening up our own coffee shop down the corner at your street there.
Um, to interject with all due
Sure.
respect,
Oh,
because this is back and forth, 100%. This is where we,
100%.
this is one of those great platforms where you and I can have a conversation about things. Um, I was actually going to lead into next week. Now that we've set the groundwork of what the stream is going to be about, next week I was actually going to go into the 4 week event that you and I had built and talk
Okay,
about who did we have at the 4 week event, what did we learn, and how did
absolutely.
you break that fourth wall and just cold call people and be like, "Hi, I'm James, and I want you to speak at my event." Like how did you find them? How where did you get them? That type of thing. I wanted to go a little more in depth in the work that you did in those 4 week programs.
Okay. Okay,
So
I'll do some thinking about that
yeah.
for next week in anticipation of going over all that and see if I can remember what I actually did.
Right. Well, the good news is that you can have all the VODs on YouTube. They're there for your reference.
True. Oh, I'm so glad we
Awesome,
have those. Yeah.
right? So yeah, I guess this is where we kind of plug ourselves.
Yes.
Um, James, do you
Everybody.
want to tell us about VAWMA specifically and how they can get in touch with you for any questions they might have specifically again around VAWMA, how they can get involved, what they can do, how can they donate money to get us off the ground. Give us more
Hmm.
information about that.
Mercy. I've never even thought about people asking people for money to get us off the ground. That feels. We'll talk about that. That sounds great.
Okay, let's do it.
But in the meantime, I would highly recommend everybody check out and bookmark www.vawma.com. That's VAWMA.com. VAWMA, like Sama, but VAWMA. with a V, and stands for the Voluntary Association for Work and Mutual Aid, to help you remember. And you can go to VAWMA.com. If you like to email me with any questions you may have, please feel free to do so currently at info@VAWMA.com. We have a website, or sorry, we have a YouTube channel, www.youtube.com/ at VAWMA. That's youtube.com/ at VAWMA. And that should bring you to where you need to go. And you can see the events that we did in November posted up there. I think yeah, I think there's still some things to do on there, but for everybody who sees us and goes, thank you, enjoy, and apologies for the technical difficulties.
You know what? If anyone is watching this stream and they have watched my stream earlier, they will know that I am not a stranger to technical difficulties and being
Mm.
transparent. I, of course, am Kat, and I am a transformational life coach. I do my own morning stream on Twitch, www.twitch.tv/live with advantage. You can see my little icon there. Right, whoop, nope, flipped icons. There we go. Um, and I am a transformational life coach that also specializes in executive coaching. So if you do have that drive of, I want to start my own business, but you don't think you're good enough, I can knock both of those problems out of the park. Um, as I said before, I do my own morning streams in the morning, motivation, meditation, and coffee with Kat, where we do some morning breath work, we do some shielding, we do some meditation, so that you can start your day off on a positive note. So you're not bombarded by all the bullshit that you hear in the morning news or the financials or whatever. Start your day off on a positive, and maybe. Hopefully, my goal with this whole thing is to bring James' message of VAWMA and cooperatives to the general public so that, we can start making a positive change. Because right now, I think we can all agree that the world fucking sucks. And if we can make a positive change, person by person, step by step, then I think we can leave this place better than we found it. So,
That
with
sounds great.
that, right? With that being said, thank you guys for hanging out for our pilot episode. I'm gonna set this as the premiere on the YouTube because this is officially our first video. And
Nice.
next Tuesday at 9:30? Question mark?
We'll get together and then maybe go live for 10.
Perfect. We'll do that. So keep an eye out for the alerts. Smash that like button so then you can get live alerts for when we do go live, or you can get notifications for when we have stuff that's being scheduled. And again, if you have any questions, you can hit up James. If you have any questions, you can also email me at info@livewithadvantage.com. Thank you again for hanging out, and we will see you next week. Peace.
Hey, long and prosper, everybody.